will all be gone. But today, we get to honor Robert Crerar, who is the great-grandfather of several of our students. And they will do a much better job speaking than I will. Kids, I know that you have some questions for your great-grandpa, and we're all going to be able to learn from them.
Today I have the opportunity to introduce you to a remarkable man. His name is Robert Crerar, and he is my 94-year-old great-grandfather. He recently celebrated his 70th wedding anniversary with his wife, Mary Lois.
They have 4 children, 10 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren, and 1 on the way. Several of his great-grandchildren attend our school and are standing here with him today.
Before the great-grandchildren, grandkids, children, and even his 70-year marriage, Robert Crerar made a decision. In 1940, at the age of 21, he signed up with the U.S. Navy in a little town in eastern Washington called Opportunity.
Robert served in World War II and was at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii when the Japanese attacked on December 7, 1941. He also served in the Korean War and eventually retired after 23 years in the service.
On Monday, our nation will recognize the sacrifice that he and other veterans made for our freedom. We will celebrate Veterans Day. I'm excited for you to meet him and hear his story. Please help me in welcoming our great-grandfather, Robert Crerar.
So I'm going to start you out with the first question that we have for you today. What did you do in the Navy, and why did you choose the Navy? Yeah.
Oh, that's better, isn't it? First of all, I'd like to thank everyone here for inviting us here this morning. It's wonderful. You know, invariably, and every once in a while, I'm asked to speak to youngsters in Canada and the United States. And it's always a great pleasure. It's always a great pleasure. And I no longer say I'm going to speak to the children. I say I'm going to speak to the young adults. Because you know why? I've learned more from you than you've learned from me. Now, I was in the Navy, and I should answer his question. I was a medic in the Navy. And I was aboard a ship called the USS Cummings, and I was on that ship for 3.5 years. I was the only corpsman, the only medic. And on the ship, a destroyer, we had 215 men. Now that's a great responsibility for a young person, as I was in those days, to take care of 200 men for that length of time. And we operated out in the Pacific. And we were at Pearl Harbor on December the 7th. Now I'd like to explain that in a division of destroyers, you have 4 ships. Now, of those 4 ships in our division, 2 of them, the Cassin and the Downs, they were in the dry dock. We'd been down to Australia and New Zealand, and we just got back, and we had to have repairs done. And so there were 2 ships in the dry dock. The 3rd ship, the Shaw, was outside of the dry docks, and during the attack, she was hit, and they had to take her back to Bremerton without a bow. Of the 4 ships, and I'm counting the Cummings now, we were the only ship that wasn't hit. We were very, very fortunate. And we were at the end of the dock where we could look over and we could see the USS Arizona. And today, if you go to Pearl Harbor, you'll see the Arizona there. How many have seen the USS Arizona? Have you been there? Then you know what I'm speaking about. Now, if you were to take a long slingshot on the Arizona, you could aim it at our ship and hit it. That's how close we were. So we were very fortunate. But we didn't have any casualties. I have to tell you one little thing. Shall I go on? Oh, you have had a question.
Where were you stationed through the years? Where were you stationed through the years?
Well, I was stationed on very many ships. I was in a carrier, the Coral Sea. I was on a number of ships in the Navy because I spent 23 years in the service.
Something happened to the mic. The mic has been...
Question.
Pearl Harbor, of course. Yes.
Haven't restate the question.
Have to turn up the mic. It's gone down.
What battles have you involved?
That's better.
Cool. First of all, was the Pearl Harbor. And then I was in 8 battles in the Pacific on the destroyer. A destroyer is used for many things, and we were involved in a number of battles. And the most important, of course, was Pearl Harbor, Tulagi, and 8 altogether. Yeah. Now, you want your next? Okay, Aaron.
How did you communicate that to your family that you survived the attack?
How did I communicate with the family? Well, I wrote a letter to my wife, and incidentally, we just celebrated our 70th birthday. Not birthday. You know, all during the war, I wrote a letter to my wife every day. So if we're at sea for 3 weeks, when we come into port, there would be 3 weeks of letters for Lois and the family. And she wrote to me every day. And what we used to do, we had two maps. And we had the maps marked so that I could send a code to Lois and tell her where we were. You know, back in those days, there was censorship. You couldn't say on board ship, and we were doing this and doing that. You couldn't do that. So I used to write every single day. That's how I used to communicate.
When were you stationed in Japan, and what was it like to live in Japan so soon after the war?
Well, let me explain first of all. In order to understand this, I have to say that in World War II, I was primarily in the Navy. And we went through all those things in the Pacific, up in the Aleutian Islands, down in the South Pacific. And I was primarily in the Navy. Now, in the Korean War, I was in the Marines. Now, the Marines don't have any medics. They don't have corpsmen. So the Navy sends the corpsmen over to the Marines. So I was transferred to the Marines. And
When were you stationed in Japan?
they're stationed there. Now, in the Korean War, I have to tell you that Lois played a very important part. We lived in a Navy housing project in San Diego, and we had 3 girls. And one night, we went to the movies. We went to a drive-in. We always did that in those days. We went to this drive-in, And when we got back to the house, it was about 11:30 at night. And our Susan was asleep, so I picked her up and I carried her in and we put her in her bed. And then Diane, our other daughter, she took Marilyn. Marilyn's right over here. And she put her in. We took care of her. So after a while, Lois and I sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. And Lois says, I've got a sweet roll out in the kitchen. How about if I put on a cup of coffee? Well, that would be fine. So she put on the coffee, and we had the sweet roll. And about 11:45, almost midnight, there was a knock at the door. And I thought, who would be knocking at this time of the night? And I opened the door, and there stood two shore patrol officers. And I just looked so surprising. What can I do for you, gentlemen? He says, we've come with your orders. My orders? I said, come in. So they came in the house. And they said, we have to deliver these to you in person. They're so important. You are to report to the Naval Hospital no longer than midnight. It was 11:45. And the hospital was 17 miles from where we were living. How could I possibly be there by midnight? So I called the hospital. I said, I can't possibly be there by midnight. So they said we'd be there no later than 6 in the morning. Lois and I packed all night. The first thing, 6 o'clock in the morning, I went off in a car to go to meet the people that wanted me at the Navy Hospital. But you know, I looked back and I thought, how can I do that? How could I have left Marilyn, and Marilyn had polio when she was a little girl. How could I leave the family, not knowing where I was going and nothing? It was a very, very strange feeling. We got to the morning, I got there at 6 o'clock. We left from San Diego, we flew up to San Francisco, and then later in the day, we took off on a plane. And they weren't the jet planes, they were the old planes. And we find it was very, every once in a while you hear, or you meet a situation where the plane would drop. Oh boy, it was scary. And we left, and I had no idea where I was going until we arrived the following day in Guam. Guam, way out there where the Goonie birds are. And when we landed, there was another plane there. And they said, now, we have picked up 100 different cornmen. And if your name starts from A to M, and my name is Crerar, so I know we were talking about me, you stay on this plane. The rest of you men, about another 50 men, you get off this plane and you get onto the other plane at the other end of the field. They're waiting for you. They got onto the plane, and it was no time at all before they were in the air. And they were going to Korea. We ended up going to Japan. And I ended up at the U.S. Navy Hospital in Yokosuka, Japan. And when I got there, I couldn't believe what we saw. There was wounded people everywhere, in the church, in the mess halls, everywhere, because there'd been a big battle. So that's how we really got your You know, I don't think there's a finer bunch of people than the Japanese people. I have great respect for them. They treated us just wonderfully over there. And I have so many friends. I really enjoy Japan.
If you could go back to the day in 1940 when you first signed up for the Navy and you had the choice to choose a different path, would you do it all again?
I joined the Navy, and I'll tell you the reason why. I was born in a little town way up in the mountains of British Columbia. And I had an opportunity to go into the Navy, and they said, if you come into the Navy, we will send you to our medical school. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. I have a wonderful education. I always was interested in medicine. And so I came down to a little town called Opportunity. Opportunity, Washington is just east of Spokane. And that's where I joined the Navy. And I would do the same thing tomorrow.
Did you get seasick when you were at sea?
Did I get seasick? One time aboard a tanker, an oil tanker carrying a lot of oil to fuel the ships. And we were at the Fairland Islands, just outside of San Francisco. Oh man, did I ever get sick. And there's nothing worse than being sick and having lockjaw at the same time.
We are so proud of you and your time spent serving America. Thank you, Grandpa, for coming to our school and sharing your story. Can you join me in thanking Robert Crerar?
Battles. I didn't do that because you've probably heard that before. But I would just like to end by saying that last night we were over in Meadowvale to hear a concert. And today we heard all of the choirs and the band. And aren't you lucky to be in such a nice school? Isn't it wonderful when you think about it? Aren't we lucky that we live in Seattle, a beautiful home? Aren't we so lucky? And when you think about people who have gone overseas, they've gone overseas in the Navy so that we'll keep the enemy from the shore, keep them off, keep them away. That's why we're there. But it's worth it. It's worth it, but especially when you see youngsters like yourself, and how much you should ask yourself every day, how lucky I am that I'm an American. Thank you, dear.
And we are so very lucky to be able to be in the presence of such a great hero and a member of the greatest generation. In my family, my grandfathers who were in World War II are no longer with us. So I place a rose on their headstones each year to honor and love them on Veterans Day. I am so happy you are here in our community today. Thank you.